There comes a time in your life when fear knocks at the door, and if you don't answer it with courage, destiny will pass you by. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move even when fear is screaming in your ear. Emotional rise. God is calling somebody in here to stand when everything in you wants to sit down, to fight when your knees are trembling, to move when the weight of the world says, be still. Build urgency. This is not a message for the weak. This is a message for those who are ready to take back what the enemy stole. Fear will always show up at the door of your destiny. You cannot pray fear away. You cannot hide from fear. You cannot wait for fear to disappear before you move forward. If you wait for fear to leave, you will never begin. Fear is the shadow that tries to walk with every dreamer, every visionary, every believer who dares to step out of the ordinary. Hear me when I tell you courage is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to bow to it. Courage says, yes, I see the fear. I will not give it my seat. I feel the trembling in my body, but I will not let it paralyze me. I acknowledge the threat. I will not surrender my future to it. Think about the student who walks into an exam hall with shaking hands, stomach tied in knots because she is afraid of failure. She wants to run out. She wants to quit before she starts. But she sits down anyway, opens the paper, and writes. That is courage. Not that she felt no fear, but that she refused to bow to it. Or picture the young man about to walk into his first job interview. His mind is racing with questions. What if they don't accept me? What if I stutter? What if I'm not enough? The fear is loud. He still steps through the door, still shakes hands, still speaks. That is courage. Courage is the mother who gets up every morning, even after losing her husband, even after crying all night, still putting breakfast on the table for her children, still sending them to school with a kiss on the forehead. She doesn't feel strong. She doesn't feel fearless, but she refuses to bow down to the weight of grief. That is courage. Courage is the man who is drowning in debt, creditors calling, the shame of bankruptcy hovering over him, but he still gets up, still goes to work, still fights to rebuild his name brick by brick, day by day. He is afraid of failing again, but he refuses to give fear the throne. Fear tells you, stay in the boat. But courage says, step on the water. Peter did not walk on the water because there was no fear in him. He walked because courage pushed him past fear. Fear told David, stay in the crowd. You're just a shepherd boy. But courage said, pick up your sling and face the giant. Fear told Esther, keep quiet. You might lose your life. But courage said, if I perish, I perish. Fear will always whisper, but courage has to roar louder. Think of the person starting a business. The statistics scream failure. Friends warn 9 out of 10 won't make it. Fear paints the worst possible outcome, but courage pushes them to register the company, open the shop, make the call, send the email. That is what separates those who live in regret from those who live in victory. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to bow. Fear is a master illusionist. It magnifies the problem until it looks bigger than your God. It takes a shadow and makes it look like a giant. It paints lies that say, you are not ready, you are not enough, you cannot make it. And the longer you bow to it, the smaller you feel. The moment you straighten your back and refuse just to bow, you discover that the fear had no power over you except the power you gave it. Soldier on the battlefield does not stop trembling when the bullets fly. His heart is racing, his body is shaking, but he still runs forward, still fights, still advances. That is courage. A woman who has been diagnosed with cancer, who sits in the hospital room, the doctor's words echoing in her ears, fear of death breathing down her neck, yet she still lifts her hands and says, I will fight, I will live, I will not quit. That is courage. Truth is, fear is universal. Everybody feels it, rich and poor, young and old, educated and uneducated. Separates the ordinary from the extraordinary is not the elimination of fear, but the response to it. Some bow and surrender, others stand tall and move anyway. Courage is the weapon that silences fear without destroying it. A young boy learning to ride a bicycle falls, scrapes his knee, feels the sting of pain, and fear tells him, don't get back on. But courage whispers, try again. And when he gets back on, shaky, uncertain, but pedaling anyway, he finds his balance. That is life. Every step of growth demands courage in the face of fear. The business leader who speaks in front of thousands but used to stutter as a child. Teacher who stands before her class even though she once froze in public speaking. The father who chooses to love again after being betrayed. These are not fearless people. They are courageous people. And their greatness came not because fear was absent, but because they refused to bow to it. There is something about divine courage that separates it from natural boldness. Human courage will take you only as far as your strength can carry you. Divine courage is borrowed strength, heaven's breath inside fragile lungs. It is the kind of courage that takes an ordinary person, someone who looks unqualified, overlooked, dismissed, and lifts them into the extraordinary. It is God placing his hand on clay and shaping it into a vessel of power. You do not have to be born into privilege. You do not have to have the perfect RA. You do not have to feel ready. When divine courage touches you, it elevates you beyond what human expectation said you could be. Think about the young girl who grew up in a small town. Nobody in her family went to college. Everyone expected her to follow the same cycle. She should have been a statistic. She should have bowed to limitation. But divine courage whispered to her heart, apply anyway. She filled out the scholarship form, trembling hands, doubting mind, yet she dared to try, and doors opened. What was ordinary became extraordinary, not because she had it all figured out, but because courage turned her into a vessel for a bigger story. Consider the single mother working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. On paper, she is not supposed to build a business, not supposed to get that degree, not supposed to break generational patterns. But divine courage burns inside her, and instead of collapsing under the weight, she rises. She studies at night while her children sleep. She sacrifices her comfort to invest in their future. People look at her and say, "How do you do it?" She does it because divine courage is breathing through her veins, turning what should have been an ordinary survival story into an extraordinary testimony of resilience. A shepherd boy in the fields was ordinary. He smelled a sheep, not of royalty. Nobody thought he could be a king. But when Goliath stood in the valley mocking Israel, divine courage rose inside of him. He reached for stones, not swords, and slayed the giant. That moment turned David from ordinary to extraordinary. It was not his strength, not his training. It was divine courage transforming a boy into a vessel of destiny. And that same courage is waiting to touch lives today, to show that God can use the least likely for the greatest tasks. Look at the nurse who walks into the hospital every day, knowing she will face sickness, death, pain, and fear. She is not famous, she is not on billboards, but her courage to comfort the weak, to speak life into the dying, to pray silently as she works. This is not ordinary. That is divine courage at work, turning an everyday job into a holy calling. She becomes a vessel of healing, carrying light into the darkest corridors. Imagine the young man who grew up shy, timid, afraid to speak in public. Teachers said he would never be a leader. Friends laughed when he stumbled over his words. But divine courage touched his lips. One day he stood before a crowd, voice shaking but heart burning with fire, and spoke with authority that silenced the room. That boy became a preacher, a teacher, a leader, not because he was born fearless, but because divine courage turned him into a vessel of influence. A factory worker punching the clock every day may look ordinary, but divine courage can stir in him the idea to invent something, to start something, to step out and build something. And suddenly the man everybody thought would retire unnoticed becomes the one who transforms his community. Teenage girl recording songs in her bedroom, thinking no one hears her voice, dares to release her music, dares to face criticism. Divine courage carries her song across nations. She was ordinary until courage made her extraordinary. Divine courage takes Moses, a man who stutters, and makes him the voice of a nation. It takes Gideon, who was hiding in fear, and makes him a mighty warrior. It takes Esther, an orphan girl, makes her queen. It takes fishermen and tax collectors, people dismissed by society, and turns them into apostles who change the world. Over and over again, divine courage proves that God is not looking for the strongest, the loudest, or the most talented. He is looking for those who are willing to be vessels. Think of the everyday father who decides not to abandon his children, even when life gets hard, even when walking away seems easier. Divine courage gives him the strength to stay, to nurture, to raise them with love. That decision, that stand, turns him from just another statistic into an extraordinary anchor for the next generation. Or the young woman who chooses to forgive the one who hurt her. Every part of her wants revenge. Divine courage turns her into a vessel of grace, a living example that mercy is stronger than bitterness. Ordinary teachers who pour themselves into students, ordinary employees who refuse to compromise their integrity, ordinary neighbors who choose kindness over indifference, all of them are candidates for divine courage. And when that courage fills them, they are no longer just ordinary. They become extraordinary vessels of hope, faith, and transformation. Your courage is not just about you. What you overcome, what you stand against, what you dare to face, it is not only for your benefit, it is a key that unlocks doors for somebody else. Many times, the very thing you are afraid to step into is the very thing that will set someone else free. Your courage is contagious. Your courage is catalytic. Your courage is a torch that lights the path for others who are stumbling in the dark. When you rise up and confront fear, when you take a step of faith, when you refuse to quit, you are not just fighting for yourself, you are fighting for the breakthrough of those connected to your life. Think about a mother raising her children. She faces hardship, financial pressure, loneliness, and uncertainty. She could collapse under the weight of it. She could throw up her hands and say, I can't take it anymore. But instead, she stands. She keeps showing up. She keeps pressing on. And her courage becomes the atmosphere her children grow up in. They watch her fight, and it teaches them how to fight. They see her refuse to quit. It becomes the blueprint for their own battles. Her courage unlocks their breakthrough because now they know resilience, they know endurance, they know that no matter what life throws at them, they too can rise. Picture a young man who grew up in a neighborhood where drugs and violence are normal, where nobody expects anything more. He is pressured to follow the same path, to surrender to the cycle. But something inside him says, he chooses courage, he chooses to stay in school, he chooses to break the pattern. When he graduates, when he builds a career, when he returns to speak in his community, his courage becomes a key. Now other young men look at him and say, if he can do it, I can too. His single act of courage unlocks a chain reaction hope for many others. Courage is not private. Courage is public. It spills over. You confront your fear. You prove to someone else that it can be confronted. When you refuse to bow to pressure, you empower someone else to refuse. Think about the cancer patient who, instead of hiding, shares her journey openly, showing both her pain and her faith. Courage encourages thousands of others fighting the same disease. Her breakthrough becomes their breakthrough because she gave them permission to hope again. Look at the teacher who refuses to give up on a struggling student. Everyone else says, he will never make it. He is too far gone. But that teacher chooses courage, to believe, to invest, to keep pushing. That one act of courage becomes the reason the student discovers his own potential. That student who might have dropped out now goes on to build something great. The teacher's courage unlocked the student's breakthrough. Imagine a business leader who refuses to compromise his integrity in an industry filled with corruption. He loses deals, he loses opportunities, but he chooses courage over convenience. His stand becomes an example to young entrepreneurs, showing them it is possible to succeed without selling your soul. His courage becomes the key that unlocks new standards for those who come after him. Think about the immigrant who moves to a new country with nothing but a dream. Fear could have kept them paralyzed, afraid of rejection, afraid of failure, afraid of starting over. But courage made them take that first job. Courage made them learn the language. Courage made them open a small business. And suddenly their children have opportunities they never imagined. That one decision to rise up in courage unlocked a breakthrough for an entire bloodline. Sometimes your courage is the sermon somebody else needs to hear. Sometimes your courage is the book someone else is waiting to read. the song someone else needs to sing, the steps someone else needs to witness. When you dare to step into your calling, you become living proof that God still works miracles through ordinary people. Think of the young woman who chooses to speak up against injustice, even though her voice shakes. People tell her to stay silent, to mind her own business, but she chooses courage. Her stand gives others permission to stand. Her one voice grows into a chorus. Her courage unlocked a breakthrough for an entire community that had been too afraid to speak. A father who grew up in a broken home but chooses to be present with his children is unlocking their breakthrough. His courage to break the cycle of abandonment becomes the key to his children's healing. A person who chooses sobriety after years of addiction is unlocking the breakthrough of everyone who thought they could never change. Their courage tells the world it is possible. Everyday life is full of these hidden acts of courage that ripple outward. A student standing against bullying in school, refusing to be silent, shows others that they are not alone. A woman starting over after divorce, rebuilding her life brick by brick, shows other women that there is life after heartbreak. A man stepping into ministry after years of running from his calling proves to others that it's never too late. In each case, courage is not just personal, it becomes generational, transformational, revolutionary. When you look back at history, the people who shaped it were not those who never felt fear, but those who chose courage for the sake of others. Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat. Martin Luther King Jr. standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial declaring a dream. These were not just personal acts of bravery, they were keys unlocking breakthrough for millions. Courage is the seed that multiplies into harvest for others. Every time you choose to be courageous, someone else gets free. Heaven does not respond to fear, it responds to faith. And when faith is expressed through courage, something shifts in the atmosphere. Courage has a sound, it has a vibration, it has a declaration that reaches beyond the natural and touches the supernatural. When you speak with courage, when you move with courage, when you take a step even while trembling, heaven hears it and heaven responds. The angels are not dispatched by hesitation, they are dispatched by boldness. Miracles are not released by timidity, they are released when someone dares to act with courage, declaring, I believe my God is bigger than my fear. Think of the child learning to swim. The fear of drowning clutches at her, the water feels too deep, the uncertainty too strong. She stands at the edge of the pool paralyzed. But then, with trembling legs, she takes the leap. The moment she does, her father, standing close by, dives to catch her, to guide her, to make sure she does not sink. That leap of courage provokes the response. It is the same with heaven. When you leap in courage, your Father responds, rushing to meet you at the point of your faith. Picture a man who has been praying for a new career. He is tired of stagnation, tired of watching his gifts rot in silence. But when the opportunity comes to apply for a job beyond his qualifications, fear whispers, you are not enough. If he bows to fear, the heavens stay still. If he picks up the application, fills it out, sends it in, his act of courage makes heaven move. Suddenly doors open, people call, opportunities align. It wasn't that the heavens were silent, it was that they were waiting for the sound of courage. When Joshua stood before the walls of Jericho, did not respond to silence. Heaven responded when the people shouted with courage. Their sound was not logical, it was not ordinary, it was faith-filled courage. The walls came down not because of human strength, but because heaven heard the sound of a people bold enough to believe. When Daniel entered the lion's den, courage was his song, and heaven shut the mouths of lions. When the 3 Hebrew boys refused to bow to the idol, courage was their declaration, and heaven showed up in the fire. Over and over again, the Bible shows us that heaven does not move until courage speaks. Think of the woman who decides to start chemotherapy. She is terrified, her body already weak, her mind filled with fear. Yet she walks into that hospital with her head lifted high, declaring, I will fight. That sound of courage reaches heaven. Suddenly strength she did not know she had begins to rise. Peace fills her heart, hope fuels her days, and her testimony becomes a miracle for others. Heaven heard her courage and released supernatural endurance. A young entrepreneur launches a business with only a little capital, no big investors. famous connections. Everything in him says, wait, play it safe. But he dares to step out anyway. He speaks life over his vision. He declares success before he sees it. That sound of courage stirs heaven to send the right clients, the right mentors, the right opportunities. His courage created a sound that summoned heaven's resources. Think about a woman standing in an abusive relationship who finally finds the courage to walk away. Fear tells her she will not survive, that she has no future, that she is trapped forever. But the day she chooses courage, the day she takes her children by the hand and says, "We are leaving," heaven responds. Suddenly doors of shelter open, support comes from unexpected places, provision appears where there was none. It was not luck, it was heaven responding to her courage. Every act of courage releases a sound that resonates beyond earth. It tells heaven, here is someone who trusts God enough to move. The sound of courage shakes chains, it breaks atmospheres, it summons angels. Pastor who continues to preach in a village, even when threatened by persecution, releases a sound of courage. Heaven answers by multiplying his impact, protecting his life, and spreading the gospel through his sacrifice. A student who dares to be the first in their family to go to college, despite every financial obstacle, creates a sound of courage. Heaven responds by aligning scholarships, grants, favor with professors who guide them along the way. A person struggling with addiction who chooses to check into rehab, who dares to admit, "I need help," makes a sound of courage. Heaven responds with healing, with restoration, with a new chapter of life. Courage is the language heaven understands. Fear speaks defeat, but courage speaks faith. Fear says, "I can't," but courage says, "With God." Fear builds walls, but courage tears them down. And every time courage speaks, heaven listens. Every time courage acts, heaven aligns. Every time courage rises, heaven responds with miracles, breakthroughs, and provision that no man can explain. You have heard about courage. You have felt it stirring inside of you. Now it is time to walk in it. Life will never wait for you to feel ready. The world will never pause until you stop shaking, and fear will never kindly step aside. The doors of destiny are voice activated, only swing open when courage speaks. Some of you have been standing too long at the edge, staring at the water, waiting for a perfect moment that will never come. There is no perfect moment. The perfect moment is when you decide, "I will not bow to fear. I will not shrink in silence. I will not let intimidation write my story." Everything you've been praying for is waiting on the other side of one courageous decision. Every breakthrough, every answered prayer, every open door is standing behind the barrier of fear, and fear will only move when you step forward with courage. Challenge you to love enough and have all the answers. You don't need to have all the strength. You don't even need to stop trembling. You just need to step. Courage is not waiting for the shaking to stop. Courage is saying, "I will shake and step anyway." History is filled with ordinary people who did extraordinary things because they had the courage to stand. Luther King Jr. said, "Courage isn't in a resolution to go forward despite obstacles." Nelson Mandela reminded us, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It's inspiring others to move beyond it." And the scriptures echo the same truth. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. If God is with you, then who can stand against you? If heaven is backing you, then no enemy can block you. If divine courage is flowing through you, then even lions will shut their mouths and giants will fall at your feet. Your family is waiting on your courage. Your children are waiting on your courage. Your community, your calling, your generation, they are all waiting for you to stand up and say, "This is my time. This is my season. This is my fight." Your courage will be the key that unlocks doors for people who never thought freedom was possible. Your courage will be the torch that lights up dark places. Your courage will be the living proof that faith is stronger than fear. Stop letting fear rent space in your heart. Stop letting insecurity dictate your decisions. Stop letting the opinion of people silence the greatness inside of you. You are stronger than your fear. You are greater than your doubt. You are more powerful than your weakness. Do not die with your song still inside you. Do not bury your gift in the ground. Do not walk away from the stage of your destiny because you are afraid of the spotlight. Step into it because heaven responds to the sound of courage. The time is now. The moment is here. Courage is not waiting for tomorrow. It is demanding today. Do not go back the same way you came. Do not hear these words and stay the same. Let courage rise up in your chest. Let it roar louder than the voice of fear. Let it push you out of the boat and onto the water. And when you take that first step, you will find that heaven has already been waiting. Angels already assigned, doors already prepared, miracles already released. Stand up, lift your head, square your shoulders, and declare with everything in you, will not bow to fear. I will not retreat. I will not be silent. I am chosen. I am strong. I am courageous. This is my time. Because when courage becomes your language, heaven becomes your partner, and nothing in this world can stop you.